Yo, what's up guys? I figured I'd redo the tier list video because I didn't actually expect it to blow up and for people to actually be interested in, videos like these. So this is going to be like a more condensed version of my thoughts from the last video. I figured if people are going to listen or watch this, it would be probably best if I was like, just straight up just talking over a long period of time without like any distractions. And it is like a 10-20 minute video just like browsing through this stuff. So with that out the way, I figured I'd be more vocal about the PvP row. I did it as like a meme. I put like some text in the video about these specs, but just to reiterate, these specs are just not viable in a raiding environment. Most of the specs for rogue are geared towards PvP and they have no utility or they just lack damage. With regards to subtlety rogue being one of the best PvP specs in the game, this is a strictly PvE list. Marksman Hunter is not close to BM and Survival Hunter, and those specs just have consistent DPS over marksmanship as well. And Frost Mage is just more oriented for PvP. It doesn't have any like damage compared to Arcane or Fire Mage though. It's usually at like the piss bottom. Now, that I have that out the way, I'm going to talk about Rogue. Combat is the only realistic spec you're going to be playing in the Burning Crusade because of improved exposed armor. Generally, this spec is just going to be a D overall. I honestly will say if you're in a guild, cherish that spot because people aren't going to bring Rogue simply because you only realistically bring one. And also Warglaves. I don't know if we're going to have like a TBC era server, but in case we don't, there's always going to be contention about that, and it's probably going to go to warriors unless you're the guild master or like you're like someone that puts a lot of work for the guild. Rogues aren't really like competitive damage wise until Sunwell because it's a utility spec and you're like generally middle of the pack. The next class I want to get out the way also is warriors because everybody from classic post next is going to want to play warrior in TBC. And due to the realized information from the previous Burning Crusade iteration back in 2022, I think a lot of people are going to want to stick to that class more. But I still want to reiterate, you need an alt. Like melees may not, like if you play warrior or rogue diehard and you have like a group, cool, but you're not going to be invited to like heroic dungeon groups or pugs sometimes, even raids. And it's a little less rough for arms warriors because of blood frenzy, but still that's just the general landscape. Like warriors, you'll see DPS warriors gonna be pretty high rated, but it's not, it's not all what it seems. Even with prot warriors, for example. And I want to say, if you're a tank, you're going to be invited to any group regardless in this instance. But when you're talking about like parsing, speed running, or just having a meta comp to clear efficiently, double bear tanks are going to edge out more of a prot warriors. Simply put, prot warriors are just hard to play. If you screw up your rotation, it's very punishing. It could wipe their raider group. You have no consistent AoE, so you're a main tank Andy. You have to manage a lot of gear options as well depending on fights, and most notably, your threat generation isn't the best. But it's a decent spec because of its defensives, and it's manageable and a serviceable tank. And with that, I'm going to put it in the B tier. Initially, I was going to think about the C tier, but at the end of the day, it's a tank. You're going to want a tank. It's just not going to be what everybody's going to run, if anything, because of dual spec. People might run this as an off spec to pick up an ad or something. You might be like a main arms or fury spec. Either one. Now, I'm going to condense my opinion about Fury Warriors and make it pretty short. It's an A tier class overall. It's going to be decently stackable and very valuable late game, especially when you get access to armor sets or armors with armor penetration. I think it's like a tooltip where it says it ignores a certain amount of your target's armor. Very valuable. However, the barrier to entry of warriors is still the same. Like if you're playing this class, it's going to be hard to get into groups because the only thing you can afford is like a battle shout to people. Plus, if you're not crafting Dragon's Maw with blacksmithing, honestly, you're trolling, and you shouldn't play warrior this time around. Or Lionheart champion or executioner for arms in phase 1, phase 2. Blacksmithing is going to be pretty important for you because, you know, Dragon Maw literally lasts you until Black Temple. Can last you as pre-raid, you know, for Sunwall as well if you have like an alt free warrior. Arms has best weapons from the raid, so like the two-hander isn't crazy, but I would still say level it if you like to switch to Fury. Arms Warrior honestly will also be an A tier overall. I think in comparison for how likely you'll be brought into groups, Arms Warrior will be more favored than Fury for sure. Which also on that token, you should probably have a double spec or dual spec for Arms just to get into groups. There's not really much to say about it that I haven't said already. Kebab spec's going to be very meta, at least that's my prediction. Some people are slam spec lovers, but for simplicity's sake and consistency with performance, some people will just go dual wield arms because they can't play Fury. So that's just, you know, one avenue that'll be pretty open for people to play. For mages, Arcane is going to be the powerhouse spec for mages in A tier, while Fire will be in the C tier. And I know, like, people can make Fire work. I'm not gonna knock you. Like, if you're a Fire Andy through and through, go ahead. But generally, it's not good until Sunwell. You need a lot of crit for it. I've seen people go Fire in phase 1 because of better damage, I believe, and also help support Fire Destro locks. And Arcane Fire is supposedly good at synergizing with Fire Destro to help with Scorch. But realistically, I think people will just roll Arcane Frost and Shadow Destro. Those specs just perform better and can sustain themselves without this fire crit stuff. I could be wrong about this when phase 1 is live, but reflecting on like 2022, this is generally what I've seen. For Warlocks, Destro is just S tier, and it's going to be one of the best specs to play in the Burning Crusade for DPS. Seed of Corruption is one of the best AoE spells of the game. There's a little bit of barrier to entry for gearing as well. Tailoring is a really huge part of casters, where, you know, the spell strike set, for instance, is going to be pretty important. And honestly, I think Biss in some of your armor slots, I definitely think the legs are going to be pretty big. It'll definitely carry you for a couple of phases. Demonology is a bit of a meme in C tier. It's still serviceable, but I don't really think people play it like seriously. I think it's just to pad parses rather than you know, be serious. I have seen it used in TK with the Impet, but generally speaking, if you're a Warlock, you're running Destro or Athlete. And speaking of Affliction's going to be in the A tier as well. It'll be A tier because of Malediction. You're essentially a utility spec, but you can still pump. It's also pretty easy to gear on in phase 1. I think a lot of people will run Affliction or Demonology in the early weeks of Karazhan until they get enough gear to switch to Destro. You can also have the dual spec to swap between Destro and Affliction, so maybe you guys could share the responsibility rather. For Hunters, Beast Mastery is also S tier, but I personally am going to put it below Warlocks alongside Survival Hunter in A tier. I believe Hunters have an AoE cap on their abilities. They are still amazing at single target. I would also say to consider melee weaving. That's a huge high skill cap gameplay mechanic of Beast Mastery Hunters, and I think Hunters in general, I'm pretty sure. You will need a Survival Hunter for exposed weakness. These will always be brought to raid regardless, and most of your comp will be comprised of mainly Warlocks or Hunters, and they'll probably be the main people you will see topping the meters majority of the time. Your best in slot for BM Hunters is like literally blues though. Like in Heroic Dungeon Gear, I think it's called the Beast Lord set. So it's something to consider. It's very light to pick up. I'm not a personal fan of, like, you know, keeping your pet happy and feeding them, but I'll probably pick one up. I think the only thing to consider too is that you will also have some contentions for trinkets like Dragon Spine Trophy that may be priored to warriors over BM. It depends on the guild though. I've seen guilds prioritize DST for hunters for prog. That's, you know, it's just yap though. I'm not too sure this second time around. Shamans are going to be the most popular in demand class in the Burning Crusade. If I had to rank it though, Resto Shamans will be S tier. Chain Heal, Totems, Bloodlust. I mean, all these Shamans have Bloodlust, so it's just broken. You may be asked to level Leatherworking for Drums of Battle, which is a mini lust, which also helps with overall DPS. Enhancement Shamans are going to be high B. They are amazing, but once you start to scale for gear, Enhancement and Elemental Shamans, also in the B tier, will fall into like a pretty supportive role. Elemental Shamans are important to bring because of Totem of Wrath, which, you know, makes your casters stress less about reaching their hit cap for your raids. You could also use it as an opportunity to gem into other stuff over time. And for Elemental, it's the gameplay is more about like optimizing your mana usage than relying on like a Shadow Priest for like, you know, Vampiric Touch. Speaking of Priests though, Priests are in a very interesting spot this time around because of dual spec. If we're talking about like progression, Disc Priests are going to be pretty valuable in the B tier. Power World Shield, PI for mages, locks, whoever, that's going to be very, very useful, and honestly will save a lot of the pulls from a lot of these hard-hitting, you know, bosses. Shadow and Holy Priest will be A tier. You need a Shadow Priest for your Arcane mages to work, also do Vampiric Touch. Holy Priests are some of the best AoE healers in the game and can also serve as tank healers. Circle Feeling is a broken, you know, AoE ability, and they also become stronger in later phases of the game. I think you'll see a lot of them pop up around Sunwell, late Black Temple, honestly early Black Temple as well. Priest is just going to be a pretty flexible class in general. I think if you were in an ideal comp, you'll probably have a Holy Priest that will flex with Disc and one Shadow Priest. But other than that, pretty sure if you're playing Priest, you're in a good spot. Like, you're going to have a lot of demand, you're going to be invited to a lot of groups. And just like I talked about Bear Tanks earlier, they're going to be absolutely S tier. Practically your off tank and main tank for the entire expansion. I mean, leader of the pack, 5% crit, that's hard to pass up. You can't make that appear from a prot warrior. Boomy, however, will be on a lower ranked tier because the only valuable thing, honestly, that Boomies bring is like Fairy Fire. And they're great, but they will also probably be a flexible class with like Dream State or Resto Druid. I say Dream State because Resto is the spec, but you usually fall under Dream State. It'll be a pretty good spec though. It's pretty serviceable in phase 1 of TBC. You will get a lot of people to, you know, you'll get invited to a lot of groups. It's not bad. The last thing I want to talk about is Paladin. Holy will be a very solid progression spec to play. However, I don't see its value increasing any more than that. I honestly see it being more of a flex class for Rets. Actually, its only strength is really like single target tank healing. So a flex between that will be pretty common. Red also will fall in this B tier as well because it's one of the hardest specs to play in the game. It's rewarding if you do it right. If you don't, you're instantly losing DPS. You bring buffs though, you bring utility. It's just, you're gonna be like middle of the pack. Sometimes you can be lucky and top DPS, or maybe be like top 5. But this class is pretty hard to kind of get the hold of. you can't really just like pick it up like a Warlock or a Mage or a Shaman. And Prop Paladin obviously is S tier. It's the only tank that can AoE mobs and trash packs. You will need this tank for heroic dungeons and raids. It'll 100% be an off tank with some niche cases of main tanking. And other than that, that's pretty much the list. Thanks for watching.